Hello, Digimon fans! Before we start, I'd like to thank all of you who contacted me and gave me feedback and suggestions after my last video. What you'd like to see, the kind of situations and rulings which you'd like to discuss about. Yeah, so a lot of them were attacking related effects. Well, I mean, partly because my last video talked about the attacking procedure. Yes, so I realized that, yeah, we can dive deeper into attack related effects, especially where the next set has keyword effects which are related to attacks. Yes, but before we go into that, I think we need to build a solid foundation and learn what effects are. Yeah, I mean, we talked about simultaneous triggering. Yeah, that was due to the new updates. So we never talked about what effects are. Yes, so that's what we're gonna do in this video. So basically, in this game, an effect is an action that occurs due to a card and affects the game or the card itself. On Digimon cards, you can find the effects here, and these effects down here are called inherited effects. They're called inherited effects because they're dormant unless there's a Digimon on top of them. So the Digimon on top of them inherits this effect down here. Well, it has to be a Digimon though, because tamers can't inherit effects this way. As for tamer cards and option cards, you find the effects over here, and down here instead of inherited effects, you usually see security effects. Well, I said usually because that is true on most tamers and options, because there are some rare occasions where we have some tamers and options with inherited effects as well. So, how do these effects work? Well, basically, most of them have to be triggered, then you can activate them. I know a lot of players tend to think trigger and activate are the same thing. They often casually throw trigger and activate and use them interchangeably along other unofficial terms like proc, but in this game, they're actually two different things. Trigger refers to achieving the trigger conditions. So basically, all effects have a timing where you can use those effects. When attacking effects trigger when you declare an attack, on play triggers when you play a card, although mind you, play is actually an official term where you put out a brand new Digimon. It's not a layman term where you just place a card on the board like when you digivolve a Digimon. So digivolving is not play. Yeah, to play you have to play it out from somewhere. It's a brand new Digimon. I gotta put that disclaimer out there in case there are new players here. Yeah, a lot of players like to ask, is Digivolving a Digimon considered playing a Digimon? Yeah, so do take note. Anyway, back to the subject. So when you meet the trigger timings of these cards, they are triggered. Remember, trigger only means that you achieve the trigger timing, not that you're using the effect. The act of using the effect is actually called activate. So take this card for example. This is the trigger timing, this is the effect. So to trigger it, you have to play it, then to activate the effect, you do whatever they say over there. Simple, right? Well, this is one of the more direct ones. There are also cards like this. Well, this card has a trigger timing, but the effect is a little different. Well, as you can see, it says if you don't have a Marcus Daemon in play, well, this is called a processing condition. Processing conditions are conditions where you have to meet if you want to carry out the effect. So even if you meet a trigger condition by digivolving into this card, you can't just simply play a Marcus Daemon from your hand for free unless you don't have a Marcus Daemon in the battle area. Because the processing condition is that you don't have a Marcus Daemon in play. Another type of processing condition can be found in effects that use the word by, like this card here. In Japanese, you can spot the word kotode. A lot of people casually call them optional effects, but it is actually an effect with an optional processing condition. So, what's the difference between optional effects and effects with optional processing conditions? Well, they might seem the same most of the time, but let me show you a scenario. One question I often get is, if I don't delete a level 4 or lower Digimon, can I play a Digimon with this effect? Well, basically the answer is yes. Then they'll show me Paladin mode and ask me, why can't I butt deck my opponent's Digimon if I don't return a 2-colored card to the bottom of my deck? Well, dear friends, that is the difference between optional effects and effects that have optional processing conditions. Well, first of all, I blame the localization team instead of retaining the original Japanese sentence structure, which says, by doing X, do Y. They decided to be over creative and changed it to you may do X to do Y. Well, this actually caused some confusion in cards like Takuya Kambara because instead of making the Digivolution into Kaiser Greymon optional, they made it mandatory because the you may do X to do Y sentence structure had no way in making the Y action optional. Well, thankfully they changed it later on, as we can see on this card here. Yeah, they say by returning up to 4 cards with Deva or False Sovereign straight from your trash to the bottom of the deck. So if we look at Paladin mode, you can see the Kotode over here. Yeah, therefore it actually says by returning 1 2-colored Digimon, da 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 da, yeah. So the reason why you can perform the second part of the effect if you don't return a 2-colored Digimon to the bottom of your deck is because the first part is an optional processing condition instead of an optional effect. If you don't fulfill the processing condition, you can't carry out the rest of the effect. Whereas the first part of Cherubimon's effect is actually an optional effect. Well, how do we spot optional effects? You check for the word may or dekiru in Japanese. And yes, the second part is also optional. Of course, as mentioned previously, this doesn't include poorly translated cards like Paladin mode, but those cards usually have a to do so and so behind the main, so it's still easy to tell them apart from optional effects. So as per the then effect rules, you don't need to successfully carry out the first part to do the second part. Well, what about the effects without the word may? Well, those are mandatory effects. You have to do them. But what if the card is like this? Yeah, it says delete 2 of your opponent's Digimon. It's mandatory. So in that case, if I can't delete 2 of my opponent's Digimon because they only have 1 in the battle area, does that mean I can't delete my own Digimon to fulfill the processing condition? Am I not able to delete any Digimon at all? Or can I just delete one since there's only one? Well, in this game, you resolve as much as you can. It says delete 2 Digimon with 5000 or less DP, but if there's only one of them, then you just delete what you can. So unlike processing conditions where you must fulfill it, insufficient targets do not determine whether or not you can activate the effect. But if there are 2 or more Digimon with 5000 DP or less, then you have to delete 2 of them. The only exception to this rule is if the cards say up to a certain number, like this Huanglongman here. In Japanese, you have to look for the term made. Notice that it says by returning up to 4 cards. So up to means that you can choose from a range of numbers between 1 to that specified number, which is 4 in Huanglongman's case. Well, some people say that 0 is a number, so why can't you choose 0 cards? Well, basically that's the game rules. They say you cannot choose 0 cards, you have to at least choose 1. So anyway, now I've gone through most of the basics, it's time to look at the 4 types of effects. This is a persistent type effect. Well, in layman terms, it is commonly known as passive effect, and it is always active and doesn't have to be triggered. So as long as your Rapidmon X antibody is in the battle area and has a Rapidmon or X antibody in its Digivolution cards, your opponent's Digimon would have their DP reduced by 4000 if they're suspended. Since it doesn't need to be triggered, it will never be pending activation and will apply immediately once a Digimon fulfills the conditions. If you're unsure what pending activation is, feel free to check out my video on simultaneous triggering. Yeah, I talk about pending activation over there. That's it. Once your Rapidmon X antibody is removed, or the Rapidmon or X antibody in its Digivolution cards is removed and causes it to no longer fulfill its processing condition, then the DP reduction will immediately disappear from your opponent's suspended Digimon. Now, these two are trigger type effects. Notice that while they are slightly different, both of them are triggered by an action. This one here is triggered when you Digivolve into this card, then this one here is triggered when you delete an opponent's Digimon. So take note of this. Not all your turn, opponent's turn, or all turn effects are persistent effects. You still have to read the text to determine whether it's a persistent type effect or a trigger type effect. Well, anyway, remember me talking about triggering and activating effects earlier in this video? Yeah, so this is how it works with trigger type effects. You trigger it and then activate its effect. Well, that said, if a triggered effect is triggered again while it's pending activation, it will also activate by the newly triggered timing. Next up is activation type effects. Well, these are effects that have main in their text, like this card here. So Activation type effects don't trigger, but they can be activated on demand whenever you want to use them. Well, of course, it has to be during your main phase since, that's what the main means. And last of all is immediate type effects like you see here. Partition is an immediate type effect. In layman terms, these effects are commonly known as interruptive effects because they can interrupt an ongoing effect. So to identify them, we would need to look for the word would or surutoki. Well, how do they interrupt effects? Well, let's look at this scenario. Levemon deletes a Digimon with the highest level, then deletes another Digimon with the lowest level. Now imagine that you have a Pyodramon and a Dynamon in the battle area. First, it deletes your Pyodramon, but before it can fully resolve its effect, Partition is triggered and you can play the necessary Digimon from Pyodramon's Digivolution card. Now, since the newly played Digimon has a lower level than Dynamon, your opponent would have to delete it instead. That said, only immediate type effects can interrupt ongoing effects. So if the newly played Digimon has an on-play effect, it won't activate immediately after being played. Instead, it would be pending activation until your opponent resolves their ongoing effect, then you would be able to activate it. Well, actually, in the comprehensive rules, effects are like, the effect section is a really, really big section. I've tried to condense it as much as I can, so hopefully I did not leave out anything that was too important. Yeah, well, I guess I probably covered most of the basics. Yep. So if you have any more questions regarding effects, triggers, activation, yes, just hit me down below in the comments or, drop me a message by Digimon Meta or Sun Gaming channel. Yes. Anyway, I hope you understood this video. That's all from me today. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!